Hi there, welcome to the latest edition of The Front Page. In this week's show, we will be looking at changes to the Cheltenham Festival. We'll be asking whether changes are needed with regards British racing's governance structure. We'll be looking back on a smashing weekend of racing at Newmarket and the Curragh and looking forward to the little matter of the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe at Longchamp on Sunday. My name is Lee Mottershead, and the name of the gentleman sat to my left is Peter Scargill. Hello, Pete.
Hello, Lee. How are you today?
Oh, well, I'm very well. I'm all the better for having enjoyed a lovely day with you at Newmarket on Saturday. Wasn't it lovely?
It was all right, yeah. The racing was good.
Yeah.
The weather was good. Having been
yes.
struck in a rain and tornado-like conditions the day before on the Friday. So that was good. But you were the man at the centre of proceedings on Saturday, Lee. The number of people who were stopping and talking to you about various things and mistaking you for colleagues of ours was remarkable. So to be as popular as you is something I aim for in life.
We both know that's not the case, Pete. But funny enough, though, you're right. I was confused for David Milnes by a racegoer on Newmarket correspondent who complimented me for having said positive words about Derek Thompson, who wasn't at Yarmouth last week, but this gentleman thought he should have been. And of course, I'm sure he should have been. But I did say I'm not David Milnes. I'm not, am I?
No, you're Lee Mottershead, I can assure you of that.
You're very sweet, thank you. And the gentleman sat at home in Ireland waiting to talk to us is David Jennings. DJ, hello. Last week when we spoke, you were lamenting having to be briefly a single parent over the weekend. Has your good lady returned this week?
Oh, this weekend was much smoother, Lee. Yeah, far smoother. Everything went according to plan. When Aoife's here, things just seem to just go okay. And there's no near-death experiences and everything was fine. So we had a harvest festival in Dunshaughlin this weekend, which was very enjoyable. Although I needed a second mortgage to pay for all the rides that the kids went on, I think. They got like these wristbands, like for 30 quid. And like, I was like, oh my God, this is extortionate money. But anyway, they had fun. And yeah, it was great. Great weekend.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, well, we're going to start talking now, first story, about the Cheltenham Festival. We spoke about it on the show last week because this man to my left, Pete Scargill, had revealed in a scoop that the Turners Novices Chase was set to become a handicap, as was the cross-country chase at the festival. Since then, Cheltenham have come back and made their own announcement about the whole sweep of changes taking place to action on the track and off it. And to talk about it, David Jennings.
Yes. So I suppose, do you want me to go through the changes first, I suppose, is the question. Would that be the best thing to do?
I think that sounds... for those who've been on the moon and have missed it last week, you just rattle through what's going to happen. Here we
go. So basically there were 6 key changes, and the one which we spoke about last week, the exclusive from our top reporter, Peter Scargill, was that the Turners is no longer really the Turners. It is what we used to know as the Close Brothers Novice Handicap Chase. So the Turners are now a handicap. The National Hunt Chase is now a handicap as well for horses rated 0 to 145. And it will no longer be just for amateurs. Of course, amateurs can still ride in the race, but now professionals can. The Glenfarclas Cross Country Chase is no longer a conditions race, but a handicap like it used to be once upon a time. The Ryanair Mares Novice Hurdle, you no longer will have a penalty for that. So the penalty structure is gone for that race. And the Pretemps Final, an old pal of mine, the Pretemps Final, who I've been writing and shouting about for years, saying what a farce it is. It's not quite the farce it used to be. I don't think it's going to be in 2025, because if you actually win a qualifier, hooray! You actually get some kind of celebratory thing to celebrate it, because you're guaranteed a run in the final if you actually win Pretemps qualifier. And the first 4 horses who qualify in the Pretemps qualifiers are eligible to run in the race. Whether they make it or not depends on, I suppose, how many winners would like to run in the race. That is the Pretemps final. And possibly one of the bigger changes is that for handicaps now at the Cheltenham Festival, if you want to run in a handicap chase, you need to have 4 runs over fences. And if you want to run in a handicap hurdle, you need to have 5 runs over hurdles. So this is obviously to do with the likes of Stateman, who won the county hurdle despite having an extremely wide passage the whole way and everything going basically wrong in the race. And he still bolted up because he was, of course, a future champion hurdle winner. So those, Lee Mottershead, are the 6 key changes to the 2025 Cheltenham Festival.
And returning back to you then, DJ, are you happy or not happy with what they've done?
I'm more happy than unhappy. That would be how I would sum up my feelings. Look, it's one of these where initially when the changes came out, or rumors of the changes came out, I was like really in favor of almost all of them. And then you kind of talk to people who are on the opposite side or against particular changes, and then you go, oh, hold on a second, maybe that's not quite as good as I thought. So just to sum up very, very briefly, I suppose, now at the Cheltenham Festival, we now have 12 handicaps. We've got the Ultimate, the Boodles, the National Hunt Chase, the Coral Cup, the Grand Annual, the Cross Country, the Turners as it used to be, the Pertemps Final, the Plate, the Kimmuir, the County Hurdle, the Martin Pipe. Then when you add in the 3 Mares races on top of that, a bumper and a Hunter's Chase, that's 17 out of the 28 races I've just described there. So that's a lot of races that are not the best against the best, if you know what I mean. It is a lot of races, really, when you put it like that. I think it's 60% of the races are either handicaps, mares races, a bumper, or Hunter's Chase, which is quite a lot. Now, the counter argument of that is, what on earth are you supposed to do? So, in my opinion, the only solution to the problem that is the Cheltenham Festival is to have fewer days and fewer races. But that's not possible, because if you have fewer days and fewer races, that means we're making less money, and that cannot possibly happen, because as we know, British racing is in, let's just say, not the best possible state at the moment. So it's all well and good. I tried to say this in a column on Saturday. I don't know if I said it well or did say it well, but it's all well and good saying the Cheltenham Festival has to be the best against the best. Has to be the best against the best. We want all these grade ones. We want 28 grade ones, and we want them to be unbelievable, and we want 3-1 the field. But it's just not possible anymore, the way the world has gone and the way jump racing has gone. And I think when we say the best against the best, like, it's not really the best against the best anymore, because in a lot of cases and in a lot of grade one, there's going to be the best from one particular stable taking on the second best from that particular stable, or in certain cases the best in that stable taking on the fourth best from that stable in a particular division, because the second and third are going for other races. So the best against the best, it's all well and good. It sounds great, but just at the moment, the way jump racing is at the moment, and the Willie Mullins dominance, it's very hard to get it right when you have the best against the best. My final point would be, I spoke to Michael O'Leary on last week about these changes. And Michael, look, people have their thoughts on Michael and Eddie O'Leary, and I know they're not everybody's cup of tea, and a lot of people feel that they give out unnecessarily about certain aspects of it. But you've got to admire their passion for the game, and I think racing is better with O'Leary's in it, because they have an opinion and they're not afraid to voice their opinion, and it's a boring enough sport as it is. But anyway, in this case, Michael O'Leary was very much against the changes, the Turners in particular, and the cross country. And the 2 points he made, so I'm in favour of the Turners becoming a handicap again, because I think personally, when it comes down to the crunch, if you have a really good 2.5 mile novice chaser, you are going to run in either the Arkle or the Brown Advisory, which makes those two races more competitive. And there's nothing wrong with taking these 2.5 milers out of their comfort zone and running in races over a distance they're not absolutely perfect over, but they might cope with. I think that's fine, and that's the way it used to be, and that's okay, because it's okay if a slow enough horse runs in the Arkle, because they'll go fast and it might actually play to your strengths. And if you're on a kind of a not a certain stayer in the Brown Advisory, it's going to be interesting to find out whether you will stay or not. So I think it's going to add to those two races. But the point Michael was making is that what's going to happen is you've got your top class 2.5 mile chaser, and they're not going to go to Cheltenham at all. They're going to go to the Manifesto Novice Chase, or they're going to go to the Willow Gold Cup at Fairyhouse, and they're just going to stick to their 2.5 mile programme. I think when it comes down to the crunch, if you have a Ballyburn, if you have a Slade Steel, if you have a Brighter Days Ahead, if you've got those type of horses who are probably in their novice careers 2.5 miles is their perfect trip, I think come February and all this Cheltenham talk and it's gathering momentum, I don't know how you're going to turn down a chance to win a race at the Cheltenham Festival. So in that regard, I think it's going to work, and I do think we're going to have more competitive Arkle and more competitive Brown Advisory. And finally, the cross-country chase. I don't know where I stand with the cross-country at the moment, because I've written for so long that, you know, it's a joke that all these former top-class Grade 1 winners have, how they've kind of fallen into this kind of cross-country route and prep for the Grand National, and that having a testimonial for them in these races is not the place to go. But then you kind of think back to last year and you say we would have had Delta Work, we would have had Galvin, we would have had Manila Indo, and we would have had like proper well-known household names running in these races, and maybe they still will. I don't know. I'm still probably in favour of it returning to a handicap, but after speaking to Michael and Eddie and a few other people about the race and just how many household names it might lose because of this change, I used to be 100% for it. Now it's probably 75%. My mind has been changed a tiny bit. So I can see both sides of a lot of arguments. But overall, as I said at the start, and sorry for waffling on for so long, I am more happy than unhappy with these changes.
DJ, if Kamala Harris or Donald Trump win by 75%, 25% in November, they'll be delighted. So that's still a clear victory in your thought process for the cross-country chase. Pete, we've heard DJ's...
I won't give as passionate an answer as DJ.
That's all right. Just give us a bit of passion.
Well, they've changed the race programme, which clearly needed to be considered and consulted on, given how lacklustre this year's festival was and the ramifications it had in terms of finances and prize money going forward with the Jockey Club, and all of the internal strife that's happened with the Jockey Club subsequently. We're looking for a new chief executive and what have you. I'm interested in the fact they made off-course changes as well.
Yes.
That gives an impression that it's a holistic view. Is one of those terms, isn't it? Holistically, they're saying, all right, so on the track it's not working, but off the track it's also not working. And in the end, people are going to be driven by wanting to see top-class competitive racing and being able to have a bet and what have you. But they also don't want to feel that they're being ripped off at the races. So, I know you've spoken about it and written about it and been perhaps more in tune with it than I have. But the off-course changes I thought were quite notable in terms of what they're trying to do around ticket prices and
absolutely. And I think it's a further acknowledgement from Cheltenham and the Jockey Club of how serious the situation is. We shouldn't forget that when we went into last year's festival, this year's festival, this last season's festival, the previous year there'd been a whopping drop of attendance of 39,000 people. The Jockey Club forecast internally, including to its members, that the attendance would rise in 2024.
Because it was teacher strikes and train strikes, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Instead it fell again by another 11,000. So a 50,000 drop over two festivals. That had the knock-on consequence of the Jockey Club forfeiting a seven-figure sum of what it expected to bank from the festival, but it didn't do. That, as a consequence, meant they had to cut their prize money contribution by £750,000, which we know a lot of members of the Jockey Club found extremely embarrassing that the Jockey Club had to do that. They couldn't deny the fact that there was a major problem with accommodation prices in Cheltenham.
Yeah, stuff out of their control,
Absolutely, but stuff within their control, things like the car parking situation, they also couldn't deny that didn't go well last year. So I think the fact that they have acknowledged all these issues, they can't deal with the accommodation problem single-handed, but we know there's this talk now with Venator to try and provide more affordable accommodation. Things like the park and ride and the National Express deal is trying to bring people in from further afield to Cheltenham, which might not be good news if you're a restaurateur.
Well, yes,
Cheltenham.
but equally it's not a good news for a restaurateur. We're going slightly off topic because we're not that bothered by. But if your hotels are charging that much, you're probably not going out for a meal in.
No, that's fair.
Cheltenham. Well. But it's interesting that they've taken this approach because people are more consider. They consider more before they spend.
Yeah.
Particularly at the moment, it seems to have been a trend that way. I mean, I was thinking of examples. Say, during the recent England-Sri Lanka Test match series, the last couple of days at Lord's, I mean, it was sparse. There was no one there, and commentators from cricket were saying, "Well, no one's turned up here." I think it was like £95 a ticket for the last couple of days at Lord's. Guy Lavender, of course, who's coming in
from the
MCC
the MCC too,
to take over at Cheltenham, and clearly that's because people didn't think it was value for money because the tests. That test wasn't particularly competitive, and they didn't want. It was problems. The crowds were down at Wimbledon this year, weren't they?
Right.
That was weather related, but also in terms of the value for money. And we've got a budget that's coming up at the end of next month.
Not even good news, is it?
That we've all been told is going to be horrendous.
Yeah.
So, my point is that the fact they've taken a wider view has to be beneficial in terms of. That just as opposed to just tweaking the race programme. So that seems to be a sensible way to do it, although seemingly they weren't entirely as effective as they could have been in communicating some of the changes to some of the people involved with Cheltenham. So perhaps that's a bad mark against them. Okay. Consulted widely, but perhaps didn't communicate it as widely, just told people this is what we're going to be doing. So that's a little black mark against it. But I think in general, they have approached this in the right way.
Yeah.
And, you know, for all that we can be grumpy and we can say things that we don't like about Cheltenham in the festival, like, we all need it to succeed.
Absolutely.
We all need it to be positive, don't we? So we should have to see whether it works in that way. You'd be slightly miffed with Willie Mullins, though, wouldn't you?
Well, you would, but you've done very well so far,
That's
and
true.
Willie Mullins will always do very well at the festival. DJ, just before we move on, just one of the aspects that got plenty of attention was the changes to the National Hunt Chase. That is a race that has evolved significantly over the last quarter century. Back in the end of the last century, 1999, it was still a race for horses who were maidens at the start of the season, a completely different race to the one it became. Now a novice handicap chase, 0 to 145, so it'll get very different horses to it's been having in the past. And I suppose almost as significant, given the age of the race and its Corinthian tradition, is the new change that means that it's not confined to amateur jockeys. That's one that's created a lot of passion within a number of people, but the reality surely is that the qualifying criteria for riders in the race meant there was a very small pool of riders who could take part in the National Hunt Chase. Some trainers were put off running horse in the race if they weren't going to get the right rider. And the whole concept of what an amateur rider is maybe different to 25 years ago, because there's almost been a professionalisation of amateur riders, not least in how good they are, to the extent that if you're one of the top amateurs, there's still a fair chance you'll get a ride in the National Hunt Chase. And do we even need more than 2 races for amateurs at the festival when conditionals only have 1?
Yeah, it's one that, you know, amateurs would argue strongly in favour of keeping it, and like, you know, they would argue that it is their festival too, and they should have as many chances as the amateurs before them had. And I know I spoke to Derek O'Connor about it, and, you know, people are saying, like, you know, how could you have sympathy for Derek O'Connor? But Derek wasn't really having, you know, he wasn't feeling sorry for himself. Like, Derek is let's just say he's definitely on the 17th hole and could be on the 18th hole of his career. Like, he doesn't have that much longer to go. You know, I don't know how many times I've written a Derek O'Connor retirement story at this stage. So Derek is not talking about himself, and Derek will go down as one of the greatest amateurs in the history of the sport. And he's more looking at, you know, the future of amateurs, and just realizing that they won't have the same chance as he did to win, which for an amateur, I know there are, you know, big races. There's a big GPT at Galway, the Connacht Hotel Handicap as it is now, and there are various races. There's the big, obviously, Fox Hunters at Aintree. But for amateurs, like, to win a race at the Cheltenham Festival that's as good as it gets. You know, it is an incredible achievement for them. But the pool of riders have become increasingly smaller as every year went by. And if you weren't in a Jamie Codd, a Derek O'Connor, a Patrick Mullins, and probably getting towards a Johnny Gleeson or somebody, you know, there was a very small pool of riders. What I would have done, and this is not my idea, but it was an idea I heard. I think it potentially was the brainchild of Patrick Mullins, so maybe he should get the credit for this. But what I would have done, and when you hear it, it makes perfect sense. I would have let any amateur ride in the race, and I would have made it a veteran's chase. And that way the horses have the experience of jumping thousands of fences, and it would be safer, and it would be, you know, household names because they've been on the go for so long, these horses. And I think if you make the horses more experienced than the riders, I think that might have been the equation that might have worked. And it kind of makes sense when you hear it in your head. Like, a veteran's chase for amateur riders, that sounds like the National Hunt Chase to me. But you might disagree, Lee, and I know you're part of the committee and stuff, so maybe that wouldn't have worked for whatever reason. You can tell me. But sorry, go for it. I suppose
what that shows, that idea, is how every idea that you have has knock-on consequences. So if you did that, and I agree, DJ, it does sound like there's logic to it, But if you create a veterans chase, then inevitably you're going to impact the Ultima, the Kim Muir, the cross-country chase, because they will all have knock-on impacts, because you want 10, 11, 12-year-olds in those races too. And I suppose Patrick's idea is built around the fact that the amateurs just deserve by right to have 3 races at the Cheltenham Festival. And again, I'm not entirely sure, given that amateurs can still ride in all these races, they're not barred from these races if they're good enough.
Yeah, but, realistically, Lee, 3 of them can ride. Are you telling me that if you're an owner and you can have any pro, you're going to be ringing an amateur who's ridden 3 winners for the whole season, and you're going to say, well, I'm going to get you instead of, so...
Clearly not. But again, Patrick's idea, if it's Patrick's idea, suggests that amateurs by right have a right to have 3 races at the festival, whereas conditional jockeys, again, who are the sport's future, only have 1 option at the festival. I'm not sure. I mean, I might be wrong, I might be being harsh, but it feels to me that 2 races restricted to amateurs during a 28 race Cheltenham Festival doesn't seem like a bad return, but I accept that other people have a completely different opinion.
And then I suppose it's your thoughts on tradition. Like, how important is tradition? How important is the National Hunt Chase traditionally being a race for amateur riders? Is that important? I don't know if it is or not. And I'm not saying your idea is, or what you're saying is wrong, and I'm not saying what Patrick Mullins is right. I just, when I heard it, and I was like, oh, it was like a light bulb. I was like, oh, that actually makes perfect sense. Where you actually have the horse as the experienced one rather than the rider, and that might kind of help it. But look, it is what it is now. And one thing actually Joseph O'Brien said to me, I interviewed him last week for the big read that's coming out on Sunday. Like, he said to me, and it's blatantly obvious, but like, this is not it. Like, this is not how the Cheltenham Festival is going to look in 2050. Do you know what I mean? Let's try them, see if they work. And if they don't, there's nothing to say we can't make further changes in 2030 or something. Do you know what I mean? So don't be afraid of change, because there's always the scope to change again.
Well, and the novice handicap chase is an example of that, isn't it? It brought it in 2011 or whenever it was brought in, it was dropped, and now it's back again. Pete?
What I was going to say is, just picking up on what DJ said there, do we know what the KPIs are for these changes? Do we know what needs to be achieved by making the amendments to say this has been a success or this hasn't been a success?
That's a good question.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Well, I would say field sizes, starting prices,
betting turnover, impact on the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the potential that you mentioned, DJ, that's and the mare's novice hurdle change. They're built around the rest of the season, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, you'd be hoping that obviously we will see a lot more of the mares in the lead up to the race and all stuff like that. But for me personally, the big telling point, and I said this in my column, if you have a big horse, a big horse, a big name that's favourite for a Cheltenham race, and it decides, no, do you know what, I'm not going to Cheltenham, not because it needs to go right-handed or anything like that, but actually it's not going to Cheltenham because it's waiting for a race at a different spring festival, that's when you know we're screwed. Yeah.
I think that's right. And if I was trying to sum up my perspective, I think in terms of change the races, I think key is that the races themselves become destination events. You need to win the Arkle or you need to win the Broadway, not just you need to win at the Cheltenham Festival. It shouldn't be a case of just winning at Cheltenham. It should be winning those specific races at Cheltenham. Anyway, a lot of Cheltenham talk there. We'll be moving on from Cheltenham to something completely different after this advertisement for our new Racing Post WhatsApp channel. Welcome back to the front page. We move on now from Cheltenham to have a little look at British racing's governance structure. Why are we doing that, you ask? We're doing that because across 2 days last week and in my column in today's Racing Post, we looked at British Racing's governance structure. It's 2 years old. It came in 2022 and replaced the old tripartite system, which was built around a system whereby the BHA board and the members committee vied for power, but it was flawed because of a veto system that stakeholders in the sport had, which meant that nothing really ever got done. The question asked in these special reports is why is stuff not getting done in the current new governance structure, one that's built around a system whereby, in theory, the BHA board becomes British Racing's supreme decision-making authority and is fed into by 3 committees, including one called the Commercial Committee, which is formed of 13 individuals, all the main stakeholders from the sport, both in terms of racecourses and participants, and they feed recommendations into the BHA board. Lots of people, however, have questioned whether the structure is working because 2 years ago, when it was launched, we were told it would help to develop and implement a new industry strategy. BHA Chief Executive Julie Harrington said in the special reports that we don't have an industry strategy yet. 2 years down the line, that seems like an awfully long wait for nothing so far. Premier Race Days, they were launched under the new strategies. Premier Race meetings, 170 of them. Yes, they've got much more prize money, but all the things that we were told would come around with Premier Race Days in a bid to really show people what was British Racing's best product and make those days feel different to all other days. Well, realistically, we've had almost nothing in relation to making those days different to everything else. Some people, therefore, are feeling that the new structure isn't delivering as promised, and they've pointed to a number of reasons why that might be. I spoke to lots of figures within British Racing governance now, and also British Racing governance from the past, and a common thread of argument seemed to come across, which was that the problem that the old system had, the curse of vested interests, remains now. And even though in theory the BHA board is the supreme decision-making authority and has more independent members than member-nominated members, still decisions are not being taken, and people within the sport, stakeholders both on the racecourse side and the participant side, are thinking too short-term about what's best for them in the here and now and not what's best for British Racing's long-term health. And until that changes, either through structural change, perhaps a wholly independent BHA board, or behavioural change from the people within British Racing governance, there's a view that nothing really will change, and much needs to change to protect British Racing's future. There endeth the address. Peter Scargill, what do you think about British Racing's governance structure?
Well, I think you should apologise for making everyone so sadly. I read it was very sad reading
it was
that.
Quite sad. There weren't many jokes in it.
It was a saddening piece, wasn't it? It laid bare the situation that we've had all this time and all this supposed good intention and achieved almost nothing. And we're at a point now where we're losing, if that's the right term. We're certainly having key figures exiting the sport.
Yeah.
So we're going to have not a power vacuum because of people coming in, but a new structure of people coming in, or a new set of people coming in, inheriting this this quagmire of inaction, frankly, isn't it? I mean, I don't get how it's going to change though, because reading your articles and doing the sort of conversations I do, everybody can see the problems.
Yeah, they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah,
almost all anyway.
And I don't know whether your experience is the same as mine. Loads of people are really positive about British racing.
Yeah.
They all say we've got brilliant racing, brilliant horses, brilliant practitioners, wonderful race courses, actually quite a lot of money. Going into different places, but we just need to sort this and this out and we'll be fine. And it can't get done. And quite a lot of the BCO talks about behavioural change. And I can't, if you're counting on behavioural change to modify the approach taken, you got no chance. I can only think of 2 instances, one particular and the sort of one half one of where behavioural change has led to anything happening in the sport. One was COVID.
Yeah.
Once in a century pandemic that led to quick action. People pulling in the same direction, and that got changes happening. Things like one meeting Wolford jockeys and no saunas, whatever other people may think of that. I
sure.
don't think they're good changes. And other aspects that were changed very rapidly to get British racing back as being the first major sport back after lockdown. And the other one was the creation of Champions Day at Ascot.
Yes.
Now, whether or not you agree with the creation of Champions Day and future Champions Day, that did happen, and that happened from quite a lot of investment, outside investment from Kipco, Sheikh Fahad and his family. So whether it needs someone to come along with a big bag of money and say, right, here's a big bag of money, we'll sort British racing out. Otherwise, I don't see how it changes, Lee. I can't see how anybody can come in and make any effective change, and why we just continue to slide down this path to.
No.
Lots of people talk about withering, and it's that sort
Not
of.
a good word, is it?
It's not. No.
And I suppose integral to the problem is the way the BHA is set up, in the sense that it is owned by the shareholders, who are the sports stakeholders. The racecourse, the racecourse and the participants, in effect, own the BHA, and through the board, in which there are 4 member nominated directors, through the committees that feed into the BHA, those stakeholders are deeply ingrained in the governance system. One interesting suggestion that was put to me during these discussions was that you look at other sectors and sports whereby, in effect, the stakeholders wave away their involvement in day-to-day governance, and just once a year there's an AGM where stakeholders, members decide if the governing body is doing a good job or not, and if it's not, in effect, they get rid of it or send it in a different direction. Somebody else suggested there has to be a complete change to the ownership of the BHA, because while you have a situation where stakeholders own the governing body, where the regulated, in effect, own the regulator, you're never going to get meaningful change. I thought what was really interesting within the pieces was that you had someone in Nevin Truesdale, Jock Club Chief Executive. Yes, he's about to leave the sport, but he is within the room where it happens. He sits in the commercial committee, and he was saying there is still this massive problem of people thinking short term about what's best for them, not what's best for British racing. Now, if he's saying that, if he's in the room saying that, then nobody can say it's not happening, surely.
No, for sure. And why would these figures take an altruistic look to things? Why would they say, this is not good for me, this is good for British racing? I mean, that's sort of benevolent, philanthropic behaviour almost, isn't it? That's if you have a big group of wealthy individuals who it doesn't matter what's going on because they're fine. These people have got shareholders or other figures that they need to keep. Well, they need to keep happy.
Joe Silverman-Smith pointed out, the BHA, they've also got their own bonuses.
Well, yeah, it's human nature. You can't expect something to be altered by changing people's behaviour as the main driver. There has to be something else. And you talk about spinning the BHA off in some respects, or separating it from the people that own it. The difficulty with that, it's a good idea. I like it in principle, but certainly from my conversations, is that there's a lack of belief in the BHA and its ability to handle the running of the sport. Now, you could say that's unfair, or you could say it's a chicken and egg situation. How they don't have? Do you give them the power to allow the people to have faith in them by them executing it, or do they have to show they can do it first before you give them the power? But they're restricted in doing so because people don't believe it. I mean, even that sentence, which was messy, sums up the situation. So I don't know how you solve it. The only way I can see it is, I don't know, maybe something like this Project Pace that's being discussed, where you can remove these top races, and there's an influx of money, and that allows that sort of sector to look after itself almost, and you can promote it and you can market it and you can say this is what we've got, and the rest benefits from that. I'm not going to talk about trickle-down economics because we all know that doesn't work, but that idea that something revolutionary like that, but even that's would be bedeviled by self-interest. I don't really know what you do, and my only possible thought, I wrote something about this a few weeks ago, is that you could argue it's unprecedented, the amount of people who are leaving from senior roles or have left. we've got a new ROA chief executive. We've lost 2 key people at Great British Racing.
Yeah.
Rod Street and Tony
Chief
Langham.
Executive Chair. Yeah.
RMG,
Martin Stevenson.
BHA,
Chair and Chief Exec.
Jockey Club,
Yeah.
and the BHA chair, which obviously
Yeah.
that process is being sorted and needs to be sorted relatively soon. We need to know who the replacement for Joe Smith is.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people who are exiting. So do you say, well, with new broom, come in, and this is your opportunity now? All of these new people all coming in at the same time, new government as well. Now's the moment to see. Now is the time we've really got to do it, because otherwise, you'll be doing a special report in 7 years' time, or whatever it is, saying
Well, the
all
irony
of
is
these things you've been saying
this
before.
exact special report was pretty much done 5 years ago about the old governance structure.
This was beautifully written.
Well, you're ever so kind.
People that must read this one.
We'll see what happens. Okay, before we move on to part 3 of the programme, in which we're looking back and looking forward to action on the track, here is some valuable information about the Racing Post Members Club. Welcome back to the front page. We end the programme by talking about some actual racing that's happened and racing that's about to happen. Pete Scargill.
I'm Mr. Positive this week, Lee.
Good man.
Good racing last week. Good racing coming up.
Good man.
Rubbish weather.
Yes.
But racing's very good.
Yes.
So you and I had a lovely day at the Cambridgeshire on
I enjoyed
Saturday,
myself, yeah.
which was good. And presumably, are you going to France?
Je
this
suis,
week?
yes.
Yeah. So you'll be able to enjoy it's into a rich time in the calendar, aren't we? With these autumnal delights.
Autumnal delights.
What other cliches you want to roll out? So, yes, it was another remarkable, unusual, in fact.
I see what you did. You're harking back to your report.
I'll have to ask DJ about this. Aidan O'Brien's desire to use unusual more often.
Yeah.
But Lake Victoria was very impressed, wasn't she?
Yeah,
you couldn't help but be impressed with that. And the idea that she was able to do that in Cheveley Park, could go for the Fillies Mile in 2 weeks' time, having won the Moidler already.
Dropped back from 7 to 6, and that might go back up to a mile.
Yeah. So you've got that, and then he's got Fairy Godmother, who's hasn't run since her Albany Butch. The form of that's looking decent enough. You've got Bedtime Stories, was injured.
Yeah.
Heaven's Gate, that won a Group 3 yesterday.
Bubbling, who won the Rockfell.
Bubbling, that won the Rock. You've got Dreamy, that might run.
Yeah. Giselle, she's hyping the betting.
It's remarkable, really, isn't it? That strength in depth of his 2-year-old fillies in particular. So I thought she was good. And then, Godolphin winner, Shadow of Light, burst Whistle Jacket's bubble. Interesting conversation, I thought, again with Charlie Appleby, reiterating, saying that I've not given up. I'm just looking elsewhere. Which
and to win, I need to go abroad.
Which I'm sure people abroad are delighted about.
Yeah.
Carl Burke can do no wrong, Liberty Lane.
Yeah.
I mean, he has had the most remarkable season, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
And
the shift, Gold Cup, and
the shift in power within the Northern training ranks that he is now number. He's got every chance of being in the top 3. The training chain. He's 100 grand behind William Haggis.
It really is the extent to which he now has become indisputably the North #1 trainer and one of flat racing's elite trainers. That's a really remarkable and impressive statement of intent and achievement.
Oh, absolutely, and it's being supported by big powerhouse operations now as well. Obviously, with Sheikh Mohammed Abeid.
And you made that reference, Pete, to what he said in May about how moving his horses from Newmarket to Northern trainers had saved him, was it?
Or just trainers outside of Newmarket,
yeah,
like Richard Hammond as well. He said it saved him about £1 million a year.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, Sheikh Mohammed Abeid's got plenty of cash.
Yeah.
But I think his point is essentially, why would I pay £1 million more to have my horses in Newmarket? And look, Newmarket's the best place in the world to have your horses trained, that's a fact. But I feel
live down the road from Epsom. It's really good stuff.
Sorry, Newmarket boy, and Newmarket's the place to be. But his point is that I feel I'm getting just as good, if not better, training for my horses, and I'm saving myself lots of money. But that's impressive. The idea that Carl Burke finished in the top 3, and on the flip side of that, I think this week's going to be a massive week for the Gosden Yard, who are languishing down to 6th or 7th. Having been champion trainers last year, John and Thady Gosden.
So they've got Inspiral, Field of Gold.
Yeah. Well, those two are the big two, aren't they? I
Yeah.
mean, Inspired in the Sun Chariot and Field of Gold in the Lagardère. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a make or break sort of week, really, isn't it? After the season they've had.
Yeah, it's big.
The other thing I've noticed that again, Rafe Beckett and his runners in Ireland, he's mustard, absolutely mustard. Bolognese going over there and winning the Goffs 500. He's had his Irish Oaks winner, whose name escapes me. That nice Valmont horse.
Yes.
Yeah, the nice Valmont horse. I'm very sorry, Valmont and Rafe and Hector Crouch.
You got to me.
You've got to me, and they didn't.
And Blue Stocking, he is so good with targeting those races.
Yeah, his season's been amazing. Full stop.
Absolutely. So that's my summary of the weekend that's just gone, Lee.
Yes.
I hope it pleases you, and I hope it pleases DJ. And I say I genuinely like to know from DJ why everything's so unusual at Ballydoyle at the moment.
DJ, why is everything so unusual at Ballydoyle at the moment?
Because unusual is a very good marketing strategy, really, when you think of it.
Don't be cynical, David.
Because
Jennings.
if you think of it, like unusual, when we say something is unusual, it doesn't really make any difference because it might be unusual to us. But when something is unusual in Ballydoyle, given the thousands and thousands of amazing thoroughbreds that have been at Ballydoyle, when something is unusual, it's just that little bit better than usual. And usual in Ballydoyle is better than usual anywhere else. So when you make usual become unusual, it makes them very unusual. So, and in fairness to him, the unusual descriptions that he's using are probably right, because unusual is probably the right way to describe Lake Victoria, because she's kind of, I think she shocked them as well as kind of surprising everybody else, and to win those 4 races and do it in the manner that she has. Like, she was, as Aidan said after the Moiglair, like they didn't really expect her to beat Bedtime Story in the Moiglair at all. Like, she was 11-2 and Bedtime Story was 4-5, and she won easily. Like, and I know things didn't go according to plan for Bedtime Story, and then it was a similar story really in the Shively Park. I know Babouche was very keen and nothing went right for her, but she absolutely bolted up. So I think one of Aidan's most remarkable achievements is his ability to run these fillies all the time and keep them sweet. Like, if you think of fillies over the years that he's managed to run loads, and they just seem to be getting better and better, like the likes of Love and Magical and all these fillies that just seem to run all the time, and yet every time they ran they seem to get better. And it's the same with Lake Victoria. Like, it's very rare, if she does run in the fillies mile, for a filly of her talent to run 5 times as a 2-year-old. Like, he's not afraid to run them. And I know it's almost natural to be negative about the powerhouse stables, but sometimes we just have to give them credit and go, it's kind of good. Like, Aidan O'Brien, every one of his horses is kind of ridden to win races. They're ridden prominently, and he's not afraid to run them. He rarely takes them out because of ground. Like, there are a lot of positives that do come out of Ballydoyle, and look, Lake Victoria, for me anyway, was the performance of the weekend. I thought she was super.
Couldn't agree more. I thought she was, and I said in the piece from Newmarket on Saturday, you'd said after Royal Ascot, after Fairy Godmother and Bedtime Story, that he'd have a different filly as favourite for the Guineas. Did you, one question I wanted to ask before we move on to the just picking up a point that Chris Cook made in his review piece today. I thought 4-1 about Lake Victoria after the Chivy Park was a really good price. Some were going 7-4, but Chris made the point that recent Guineas and recent comments by Aidan around Guineas time suggest he's maybe giving less emphasis on those races and allowing horses to come along a bit slower in the spring. Would that put you off backing any Ballydoyle horse for the Guineas at the moment?
Yeah, it would put me slightly off the line in winter in the 2000 Guineas. I interviewed him before the Derby, and at that stage, City of Troy, I think I was on one of these shows and wondered would he ever run again after the Guineas. And I did a piece with Aidan ahead of the Derby and basically used this whole courtroom analogy, which was probably a load of scutter. But anyway, and I said to him, look, are you doing things differently? Because our Irish editor, Richie Forrestal, had done a piece kind of saying, he's just wondering, are things kind of, as you said there, are they being done a little bit differently in Ballydoyle? And I said this to him, and he openly admitted it. He said, well, yeah, we are doing things differently because the season for a flat horse now is gone so incredibly long. And what he was trying to say to me was basically you're kind of taking in Dubai as such as the end of the season. in March, and you're kind of going, it's 10, 11, almost 12 months now, the season for these top class horses. And what he was saying was, look, if you have them absolutely at the peak of their powers and to their max potential, sometimes for the last Saturday in April or the first Saturday in May, it's very hard to keep them improving throughout the season when you've got them maxed up to be absolutely dominant in that first Saturday in May as it was this year. So he has changed tack a little bit, and it's almost as if, I don't know, where if you look back at the last 2 years, like you look at Auguste Rodin and Little Big Bear, and you see those two running the Guineas, like the ground was a mess that day. It was a mess of a race, and just look at the winner. Like the winner turned out to be not so good for Andrew Balding. But this year with City of Troy, as Aidan said, it was a bit of a mess. Whatever happened in the gates happened in the gates, and then he went hell for leather, and then he just blew up. And so there were circumstances which conspired against his Guineas runners. But I do like, if you are thinking of having a substantial wager in one of the first in either the 1,000 or the 2,000 Guineas, it must be in the back of your mind the last couple of seasons what happened in the 2,000 Guineas especially. And that's why I think Lion in Winter, to me personally, is head and shoulders the best 2-year-old colt I've seen this season. I think he's only going to get better. He could win the Dewhurst very convincingly and be a very sure price for next year's 2,000 Guineas. But then you're thinking to yourself, the Derby, he's a son of Sea the Stars. He looks every inch a Derby horse. Is he going to be cherry ripe for the 2,000 Guineas? So I agree with you. I think it has to be in the back of your mind. Now, maybe that'll change next season, but he is doing things. He is tweaking things. He says it all the time when you interview him, that everything has been tweaked all the time from season to season. And maybe one of those little tweaks is just not having them absolutely a concert pitch for the Guineas at Newmarket.
We know, though, the horses he runs on Sunday in the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe.
Well, before you move on to France, Lee,
go on.
I was going to try and give you a link.
Oh, go on.
But it's probably not going to work now that I've interrupted your link.
No, the editor can just delete that with the producer. He could go on.
But we didn't talk about Ile-Francais, who won at the weekend as well.
Ah, oui.
Because I'm a man with an international outlook.
Yeah, big jumps fan.
Big jumps fan. But he was very good.
He was very good.
Very short price favourite for certainly favourite for the King George now.
Yeah.
So he's going to go
By the Edge
there it is. I'm glad you said it.
Yeah.
But anyway, which noticeable that he came back and he was back to the Ile-Francais we saw in the Courteau Star rather than the Ile-Francais we'd seen in his last run when he was very flat and didn't perform at all. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
And you make a good point, and we will say much more about Ile-Francais on this programme over the coming weeks. And I still have a good link because Pete was talking there about weekend action at Auteuil, Paris. Mm-hmm. I'm now going to talk about weekend action at Longchamp. Prix de Triomphe this weekend. This has been a long show already, and we applaud you for your stamina for reaching this point. So it won't take this long, but who wins the Arc? Peter Scargill.
No idea, Lee.
Well, that was a waste of time, wasn't it?
What, the whole show? Or talking to me?
No, just that little segment there.
I don't know, Lee. I'm just going to enjoy it as a racing fan.
Okay. Cop out. I'm going to say, DJ, I think this could be Japan's year. I'm tipping Shin Emperor to win the Arc.
Yeah, great chance. Great chance, yeah. Not to go back to British racing's worries, but the fact that Sunway is going to be the only British trained runner in the race and is only the only British trained entry, I think, at the forfeit stage today. Like,
no, blue stocking, DJ. Pete says blue stocking.
Yeah. Whoa! I was coming to that. Okay,
okay.
Until the supplementary stage on Wednesday.
Yes.
Is a little. That's. I know, like you can say, there's only one Irish trainer represented with 5 runners at the moment, but that's astonishing. Really, I'd love to go through the stats and just see when was the last time either there was only one British trained runner or none. It would be. That's a bit of a worry. As regards what will win the Arc. I'm a big Shin Emperor fan. I didn't realise just how unlucky he was in the Irish Champion Stakes until my colleague Dom McLean, sitting beside me, who is fluent in Japanese, would you believe, and did work in Japan. Yeah. He told me to go back and watch the race again, and I did, and I was like, whoa. I was like, this horse has to have a chance in the Arc. Now, maybe he's not good enough, and when it comes to the Arc, he won't be good enough, but as a prep, it was a hell of a prep for the Arc. I think Shin Emperor has a big chance. I keep coming back to Al Rifa, who might not be quite good enough to win if there's a superstar in the race, But you just look at it this year and you say to yourself, is there a superstar? I don't think there is. And I think Al Rifa has been trained to the minute for one race only this season, only been once over in a mile and a half and bolted up in Germany, will handle whatever ground is thrown his way. If it's soft, all the better for Al Rifa. He's a big, giant, imposing lump of a horse that's got a chance. And it could be a big day for Japan, but maybe not in equine form, but in human form with Yutaka Taki.
One last question, then we need to finish this show because it's been going on forever. Yutaka Taki, DJ. No. Yutaka Taki, would his presence on Al Rifa's back put you off in any way whatsoever?
No, I don't think so. I haven't seen enough of him riding lately to know how he's riding, but I presume he's still decent. The experience is a massive thing. Look, Dylan Bray-McMonigal is probably Ireland's best up-and-coming jockey that's under the age of 20 or 21 or whatever. So Dylan has had a terrific season and he's a really good jockey. The one thing that Joseph did say to me, which I know this sounds like, oh, sure, of course he should be doing this, but Yutaka flew over to Owning Hill last week and I think he flew over and back in the same day from Japan just to ride Al Rifa in a routine piece of work. And Joseph said to me, he goes, look, I didn't necessarily tell him to come over. That was his dedication to try and winning an arc, to come over, whether it was over and back in the same day or over certainly one day and back the next day. It's a fair achievement. Japan is not like down the road in Louth here or Westmeath or something. It's a fair trip for just to sit on a horse for a piece of work. So that just goes to show you the level of preparation that's gone into Al Rifa. And, maybe he's just not good enough and he mightn't be good enough, but I think he's going to be bang there.
So we're expecting a big weekend for Japan in France. That is then pretty much the end of the show. I have to tell you who has the winning story. I suppose in a wider sense, the British governance structural situation is probably the most important issue. But I had the winning story last week, and I said before in this program, I've got guilt complex. Great stuff from you on the racing. But Cheltenham is Cheltenham. So DJ, you have the winning story. Well done.
Yeah, after talking for, I suppose, 12 and a half hours about it, I suppose the least I could do was win.
Next week's show, I'm almost certain will have no Cheltenham content whatsoever. There will be art content. We'll be talking about that and much else besides. Until then, thank you, David Jennings. Thank you, Peter Scargill. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.